Morning, all. Today we got 10 games in the NHL, and not all of them mean anything. And we are at that point of the year where that kind of happens. Please don't let Saturday be 15 games that don't mean anything. That being said, if that happens, I'll figure out a fun way to do the preview for that. Different stats, numbers, past records, that kind of thing that I can throw in there. But let's go ahead and start things off with Boston and Columbus. This means something for Columbus, but it should mean something for Boston. Now, while Boston's very, very highly likely to finish second in the division, unless Toronto wins out and Boston loses out, that should be what happens. The Bruins are 47-23-9, whereas the Columbus Blue Jackets are 45-30-4, and Columbus is playing very well. More specifically, Bobrovsky's playing very well, but I'll come back to that. Right now, they are number 2 in the Atlantic, are those Bruins. They are 4 points ahead of Toronto, whereas the Columbus Blue Jackets are the number 1 wild card. They are 1 point ahead of Carolina. They are 2 points ahead of Montreal. They are 3 points behind Pittsburgh. So this is a very crowded little race we got going on in the East. Both teams have won a game between these two, and these two teams have played each other twice in the last month. I think it's about, maybe not even, probably less than that. So there may be some dislike that starts getting over into this game, and that might help the Bruins a bit here because with their play in their last 2 games, I am concerned. Scoring for this season, and again, I'm looking at noteworthy players. Part of this is because there's teams that aren't going to be on the board anymore as of Saturday. That will be the end for them. So, looking at some players who've had some noteworthy seasons or guys you'll be looking at going forward. And then for teams going to the playoffs, players worth mentioning like Brad Marchand's 35 goals, 63 assists, 98 points. So 2 points away from 100. He should get it, but the way Boston's been playing, I don't know. He should get it. Krejci, 19 goals, 50 assists, 69 points. He's had a very good season. Danton Heinen, 10 goals, 23 assists, 33 points. He's come on in the second half. First half, he wasn't very good. Jake DeBrusk, 25 goals, 13 assists, 38 points. He may be one of these guys who's 25, 30 goals every year, but still ends up around 40 points. Charlie Coyle, in 18 games with the Bruins, has 2 goals and 3 assists for them. I'll give him a C grade in his time in Boston so far, but having watched Donato in Minnesota, I understand Donato struggles on the other side of the puck. I understand that defensively it's more of a misadventure, but the offense is there, and he's still young. On the Columbus side, Panarin, 27 goals, 56 assists, 83 points. He's going to be a very well-paid free agent this summer. Look, everybody's going after Panarin. He's going to make a lot of money, and I think it could end up being ridiculous money. Dubois, 25 goals, 34 assists for 59 points. Duchesne, in 20 games with Columbus, 3 goals, 8 assists. Dzingel, same totals, only needed 18 games to get there with 3 goals, 8 assists. And Wenberg stands out as a guy who's likely on his way out of town some way, somehow. 2 goals, 23 assists for Wenberg this year. It's been a miserable year for he, and probably not one of Tortorella's favorites, I would think, at this point in the game. So that being said, I wanted to look at goaltending duos and just do a brief little chat about them, where they're at right now. Halak and Rask, I'm concerned. Rask's numbers have been poor for a while. Halak's last start wasn't very good. Not going to get into who's starting. I would imagine Rask. I didn't even check yet this morning. Because for me, going into the playoffs, I look at Halak, I look at Rask, and I say, can these guys win a Stanley Cup? And I don't see it right now. On the Columbus side of things, Bobrovsky's playing fantastic. So the 9 shutouts, the fact that it feels like 8 of them have been in the last week and a half. A guy who halfway through the season looked like he was going to have the most miserable year of his career. He has definitely turned it around. He is definitely not having that now. All right, next up, San Jose have clinched number 2 in the Pacific, and Vancouver's been clinched as being out. So there's not really anything on the line here, but there's always something to look at in any game. 44, 26, and 9 is the record for San Jose. 34, 35, and 10 is the record for Vancouver. Vancouver lost all 3 games against San Jose this year. Just think, if they'd beaten San Jose those 3 times rather than losing to them, they'd have 6 more points. And we'd have a whole other conversation going on right now, wouldn't we? It's a fine line between winning and losing, and sadly for the Canucks, the California teams have very often been the bane of their existence. Now, there are some noteworthy scorers on San Jose trying to take out the obvious. So noteworthy scorers for the Sharks, Tomas Hertl, 35 goals, 35 assists. We're not talking about Hertl. So while everybody's scoring 100 points this year, it would seem, Hertl 70 points slides under the radar. Timo Meier, 30 goals, 36 assists for 66 points. Kevin Labanc, 15 goals, 39 assists, 54 points. That's an insane number for Labanc. I like Labanc, but 54 points, that seems really high for him. Evander Kane, 29 goals, 24 assists. And Logan Couture, 27 goals, 43 assists. He really just keeps motoring along. And again, because of some of the gaudy point totals being put up by people. And in San Jose, the headliners, Joe Thornton, because, he's Joe Thornton. Pavelski with his 37 goals. And Brent Burns. And then, of course, Erik Karlsson when he's healthy. On the Vancouver side of things, Bo Horvat, 27 goals, 32 assists. The debate over his ceiling will continue. I think 60 points, that's about right. I always envisioned him being probably 65, 70 points at best. I don't see him as a number 1 center. I see him as an excellent number 2 center. And I think that's where we're going to end up very soon. Louis Eriksson, 11 goals, 16 assists. It's been a miserable year for Louis. And I think that's the part that people forget. While fans get mad about how Louis hasn't played up to his contract, I'm sure Louis not happy either. He's not putting up totals like he had in Boston or Dallas. He probably realizes with a contract of less money, he would have got traded a while ago, and his scoring probably would have come back. I just think it's a bad matchup for him in Vancouver. And I think at a lower cap hit, I think the Bruins would probably take him back, or Dallas would take him back. Dallas needs that depth scoring. And I think with a move back to one of those cities, I think he could get back to 25 goals. Not 30. I'm not saying 30 or 40. I say about 25. Pearson, 16 games played as a Canuck, 5 goals, 2 assists. Again, be interesting to see if they bring him back next season. Luke Schenn, 15 games played and 2 assists, but more importantly, he has been hitting like a freight train. And the Canucks are talking about bringing him back next year. There is some interest now in bringing him back. They feel he's helped to solidify their blue line. Not that there'll be any credit given to the general manager for picking him up or to the coach for getting him deployed correctly. But, Luke Schenn's still young enough that, yeah, he can play. And if he can help protect Quinn Hughes, not a problem. Quinn Hughes has played 2 games, has 1 assist, and has electrified the Canucks fan base at this stage. Jones and Dell, goaltenders for San Jose. That's an issue. It is. And I know there are going to be San Jose fans who are going to come in and say, no, it's not the goaltending. I've seen too many goals this year that seem kind of like the kind of goals you don't want to allow. So the goaltending's definitely not been great. Markstrom and Demko, this going into next year could be one of the better tandems in the league. It started out the season as Markstrom and Nelson, and it didn't look very good. Demko's come in. He's been good in recent starts. But really the story, not as much the backup as Markstrom. Markstrom has finally really come into his own at a level that I didn't expect at all. And I'm glad. Philly. So the Flyers are out. They're in against Dallas. The Flyers are 37-34-8. Dallas is 41-31-7. Wild card number 1, that is Dallas. They are 3 points up on Colorado. They are 5 points up on Arizona. If you win, you're in Dallas. So just win the game. Now, and that seems like a really simple request, but this is Dallas, and it's April, so it's not. Philadelphia won the only meeting these teams had in Philadelphia this year, so we'll see what happens tonight. Philadelphia, of course, has been an interesting team to watch this season as things have kind of fallen apart. They get rid of the GM, they get rid of the coach, but the record's still not bad. It's not like this is a horrible team. Voracek, 20 goals, 44 assists for them. Konechny, 23 goals, 24 assists. I think Konechny has another gear that he'll reach next year. Nolan Patrick, 13 goals, 17 assists. Hartman, 16 games as a Flyer, 2 goals, 3 assists for him. Philippe Myers, who Flyers fans seem to be very high on. 19 games played, 1 goal, 1 assist. We'll see how prominent a role he plays next year. And I'm starting to agree with people who say that Ghost could be the guy who ends up on the outs with Philadelphia. Gostis Bears had another down year, and I could see Philadelphia making a move and moving him out in order for help somewhere else. Or just a different style defenseman. They may trade him out for another defenseman. On the Dallas side of things, Heiskanen, 12 goals, 21 assists. He's had a steady year. His offensive numbers haven't been there at times, but he's had a steady year as a top 4 defenseman. Only good things should come from here for him. Foxa, 15 goals, 14 assists. Cogliano, 30 goals. Or 30 games. 30 goals. 30 games as a member of Dallas. 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. L'Esperance, 17 games played, 1 goal. Kudos to a guy that I had never heard of before they called him up, playing 17 games. Alexiak, no points in 19 games since returning to Dallas. And we'll see how long he's a Dallas Star this time. I'm already starting to think, you know what, they'll probably move him again. He's probably not going to be a star for very long. Just a hunch I have. Anyways, goaltending, when you look at it, Carter Hart is the future. There was a good April Fool's played yesterday where somebody sent out that the Philadelphia Flyers had re-signed Neuwirth, Elliott, and Talbot for next year, and they were going to rotate 4 goalies. Kudos. Would anybody be surprised if they actually did it? On the Dallas side of things, of course, Bishop and Hudobin, this all depends on Bishop's health. So this is an excellent back end for the Dallas Stars, depending on the health of the goaltenders. And Philadelphia, their goaltending is solid. I have a feeling it's Hart and Elliott next year. I would be very surprised if Talbot comes back or if they decide to keep Neuwirth around. I think Neuwirth's constant health issues, I think he's probably out as a Flyer. And they'll look in another direction next year. But the key thing for tonight is all Dallas has to do is win a game. They just have just one game. Just one measly game. Just one. Just win it. Next up, Tampa. Okay, so they got to 60 wins. They're 60, 15, and 4. Now they're in against the Montreal Canadiens. So we expect a bit of a down game from Tampa, right? I would say so, except for this. Montreal could be their opposition in the first round. Could be. So do you want to go in against your opposition in the first round and go, Or here's the cynic. What if they look at Montreal and go, you know, that's the team we'd like to play in the first round. We don't want Columbus in there. And what if their efforts to ice a great team aren't that great? They lose the game. Montreal ends up in a playoff spot, depending on what happens from there. That's what the cynic in me sometimes wonders, is whether or not that might be something teams at least think about. So, Montreal at 42, 29, and 8. This is desperation time. It's been desperation time for about a month. That's why Carey Price plays every game. They're 1 point behind Carolina, 2 points behind Columbus, 5 points behind Pittsburgh. So again, if Tampa says, well, we don't want to play Carolina, we'd rather play Montreal than Carolina. Anyways, Tampa Bay's won all 3 meetings with Montreal, so there's been no mercy to this point. I don't expect any tonight either. And when you look at the Tampa Bay side of things, it's a very impressive lineup they've got put together. Braden Point, 41 goals, 51 assists. Nobody's talking about him either. We're all talking about Cooch. Johnson, 28 goals, 18 assists, 46 points. I mean Kucherov. So just got to specify. Palat, 8 goals, 25 assists. Gourde, 22 goals, 25 assists, 47 points. Excellent sophomore season for him. And there's Kucherov at the bottom. 39 goals, 86 assists, 125 points. So it's a very Gretzky-like total because that 86 assists, that would lead many teams in points for the season. So yeah, Kucherov is doing his best Gretzky impression with an assist total like that. On the Montreal side, Jonathan Drouin, and there's talks of him being pushed down the lineup in his struggles. 18 goals and 34 assists, which is lower than was expected. Petrie, 13 goals, 32 assists. He's had an excellent season. Jordy Ben, 5 goals, 15 assists, 20 points. Good on Jordy. 20 points in a season. I didn't think I'd see that either. And Wheel, in 13 games as a member of the Montreal Canadiens, 3 goals and 5 assists for him. He's been a very solid pickup. Lehkonen, 10 goals, 17 assists. One of those guys that I look at with Montreal and I say, so do they keep him through next year? Do they look to move him? What's going to happen with Lehkonen? Because I think there'll be some moves with Montreal. Not the major, no core guys, but we'll see what they do. Goaltending tandems, it's simple. Vasilevsky and Domingue, very solid. Vasi's numbers over the last couple of weeks haven't been as solid as they were, but I still think he probably wins the Vezina. But it's got me down to probably, because his numbers have come down. Carey Price, notice I didn't put anybody under him, because to me this isn't a tandem. Niemi is there. He's physically played games. But Montreal only goes as far as Carey Price takes him. And it's a storyline that has existed going all the way back to 2010, 2011. When he was finally the starter, Halak was jettisoned, allowed to leave, and they went with Carey Price as the starter. It's his show, it's his net, it's all up to him. So we'll see what happens from here with him and with the Montreal Canadiens. Next up, Carolina 42-29-7 in against the Toronto Maple Leafs 46-26-7. Beware Toronto Maple Leafs of that emotional high you get from a win going into your game the next night. We've seen that a lot lately, where the second game of back-to-backs is a downer because you win that first game. Maybe it's an emotional win. And last night it would have been an emotional win for Tavares. They'll downplay it. But after the stuff that happened in the first trip to Nassau and the beating they took, and then the second game, the way they went out and they won the game, they played a very smart game on the road. They have to avoid now having some sort of a come down against the Carolina Hurricanes. Not only that, but at many times this season, it's felt like Toronto's a better road team than they are a home team. Now, the 42-29-7 record for Carolina means that they are currently in a very, very close race right now. Now, that's a 43-29-7 record. They're right next to Montreal, and I'm like, that can't be the right record because that'll put them a point behind Montreal, which changes the narrative completely. So they're the number 2 wild card. They're 1 point behind Columbus, 4 points behind Pittsburgh, and 1 point ahead of Montreal. On the Toronto side, they're, of course, third in the Atlantic, 4 points behind Boston. But if Boston loses in Columbus, which could happen because Boston's road record has been kind of middling, and Columbus has been playing fantastic lately. And, you know, if Toronto can beat the Carolina Hurricanes, who kind of feel like they're kind of backing out of the playoffs, yeah, that only puts them 2 points behind Boston then with a couple left to play. It's not over. Anyways, both teams have won a game in the season series between the two. This is the third and final matchup between these two unless they play in the playoffs. If they play in the playoffs, there's going to be celebrations in the street in Toronto because that means they got to the third round. Notable scorers for Carolina. Williams, 22 goals, 29 assists. Justin Williams, early in the year, his scoring just wasn't there and it looked like he was slowing down. Not anymore. 51 points for him. The guy doesn't age. Slavin, 8 goals, 22 assists. Niederreiter in 33 games with Carolina, 13 goals, 14 assists, 27 points. He is one of many players who have played better after a trade than before it. Fogle, 8 goals, 5 assists for him. Van Riemsdyk, 3 goals and 11 assists on the blue line for the Carolina Hurricanes. On the Toronto side, Kasperi Kapanen, 19 goals, 24 assists. I'd like to see Kasperi hit 20. Knowing that he doesn't think he'll ever score again and seeing him fighting the puck like he has been lately, I don't like that because Kapanen's one of my favorite Maple Leafs. So, by all means, I hope he hits 20 tonight. That's why I got him up here. Marleau, 16 goals, 21 assists, 37 points. The offense isn't what it was, but that's not why he was signed by Toronto in the first place. He was signed to be that veteran leader, and he's been that. Nylander, 51 games played, 6 goals, 20 assists, 26 points. And it is beating a dead horse to talk about Nylander's production, but there it is. 6 goals in 51 games. And I have to ask myself, if you had asked Dubas when he signed the contract, how many points do you think he'll produce? I think he probably would have said, it'll take him all, probably about 40. I really think 26 would have been lower than anything Dubas would have imagined. Nikita Zaitsev, 3 goals and 11 assists for him. And Calle Rosen got a goal in his first game with Toronto. Would be nice to see him get a point as well. Maybe he can get an assist on Kapanen's goal. That would be nice to see that happen. There are some nice stories with Toronto that I really enjoyed. The funny thing is, I do get painted as hating the Maple Leafs, and I really don't. 3 years ago, yeah, probably. 4 years ago, absolutely. But it's not. It's just not there. Because I like the team they have now much better than the one they had 4 years ago. It's a completely different team. Now, goaltenders, their former goaltender McElhinney is potentially in net tonight. He and Mrazek have told quite the story for Carolina. The one problem I have is playoff hockey's completely different from regular season, and I don't know that I can see either of those guys winning a round. On the Toronto side of things, they're against Boston. It'd be nice to see Anderson silence the critics. It would. It'd be nice to see Freddie Anderson perform in the playoffs and silence the critics, because he's a good goaltender. There is something there. The one thing that I've noticed with Freddie Anderson is that he does tend to seem to get tired, overworked a little bit more than other goalies. So maybe there's a conditioning thing there. That's the only thing that I can even look at and say maybe. But again, I'm not saying there is. I'm just saying maybe. Or some kind of a regimen change would have to take place, something. Because he does seem to get tired as the season goes along. And of course, Sparks, if they had to go to Sparks in the backup role in the playoffs, that could be an issue. Sparks is a half decent backup. He's not starter material, so they need Anderson healthy and performing. And I think maybe with Freddie Anderson too, maybe it's a Jake Allen thing where it's mental as much as physical. So maybe there's just some kind of a mental thing that takes over with him. All right, next up, Winnipeg. The Jets 46-29-4 in against the 36-34-9 Minnesota Wild. Number one in the Central. That's where Winnipeg resides. They're currently 2 points ahead of St. Louis, 2 points ahead of Nashville. Whereas the Minnesota Wild, they are desperate. This is it. But they've been in this is it territory for about a month, and it hasn't got better for them. They're 3 points behind Arizona, 5 points behind Colorado, who occupy that final playoff spot, and it doesn't look good for them getting it at all. Minnesota's won all 4 meetings between these two teams, however, so there's that. It's weird when you see this kind of thing where, you'd look at these two teams and go, well, Winnipeg's the better team. But head-to-head, Minnesota's won all 4 meetings this year. So it's strange. I even double-checked to make sure that I was reading the chart properly. I'm like, well, no, it says 4-0. So we'll see if they can make it 5 tonight and at least keep that race somewhat close. The problem is Colorado's playing tonight. Arizona's playing tonight. They may gain no ground whatsoever, even with a win. Scoring of interest on the Winnipeg side, Kyle Connor, 33 goals, 30 assists. So yesterday, I pointed out Laine has 30 goals and 20 assists. He still has that total. If Laine's worth X dollars, 5, 6, 7 million, how much is Connor worth? This is the cap crunch that's going to be hitting Winnipeg this summer. Jacob Trouba, 6 goals, 41 assists. He's going to get a lot of money this summer as well. Perreault, 15 goals, 15 assists. Tyler Myers, 9 goals, 21 assists. Samu Niku, who I want to see more of for the Winnipeg Jets. 30 games, 1 goal, 3 assists. And I'm wondering if they're going to move somebody off the blue line and Niku gets a full-time job next year. Because I've been impressed with the kid for the most part. On the Minnesota side of things, Zucker, 21 goals, 20 assists. Donato, 19 games as a member of the Minnesota Wild, 4 goals, 12 assists for him. It's worth tracking because when he came in, it was just sort of this is one of those whatever deals, right? And he's kind of made it more than that. Fiala, since the trade from Nashville, 16 games, 3 goals, 4 assists for him. Aberg, since arriving from Anaheim, 22 games played, 1 goal, 5 assists. And Victor Rask, since arriving from Carolina, 20 games, 1 goal, 1 assist for him. So it's a mixed bag when you look at the pieces that they've acquired over the last few months. Minnesota hasn't got better. I don't think they've got appreciably worse either than they would have been if they kept everybody. But they've fallen out of the playoffs, and it is highly unlikely that they make the playoffs now. Goaltending side of things, when you look at Winnipeg, you got Hellebuck, and then, of course, the Comrie Brisebois. Comrie won't see ice time. Brisebois, they're going to wait till he comes back, I would think. Hellebuck is having a better second half than his first half. On the Minnesota side of things, Dubnyk has been average. Not bad, not great. Stalock, they don't seem to have any faith in him. He's not getting starts, which tells you they just don't have faith in him. That being said, it is now time for me to change boards. Alrighty, Nashville. So the Nashville Predators, who are where they have to win tonight, because they're falling into a rather uncomfortable position that they haven't been in for over a year. They're not the favorite. They're 44-29-6. They're in against the out Buffalo Sabres, just really far out now. 31-38-10. They now have the same record as the Detroit Red Wings. They are third in the Central. Are the Nashville Predators. 2 points behind Winnipeg. They're tied with St. Louis, but regulation and overtime wins, which is your first tiebreaker. 41 for Nashville or for St. Louis, 40 for Nashville. So that's the differentiator that puts St. Louis ahead of them and gives them home ice if the two teams meet in the playoffs. And I don't like Nashville's chances if they have to go to St. Louis for games 1 and 2 and potentially game 7. Nashville's won the only meeting between they and Buffalo so far this year. Buffalo is, let's get into that. So, looking on the Nashville side of things, Matthias Ekholm, 8 goals, 36 assists. He's had an excellent season. Smith, 20 goals, 16 assists, just chugs along, gets 20 goals. Turris, 7 goals, 15 assists. They really need more out of Kyle Turris. I don't know how long he's going to be a Nashville Predator with the kind of numbers he's putting up. Brian Boyle, 23 games in Nashville, 5 goals, no assists. Granlund, 13 games since arriving from the Minnesota Wild, 1 goal, 3 assists for him. So if we're going to look at Fiala and say, well, Fiala not putting up a lot of points in Minnesota, that's fine because Granlund's putting up fewer points in Nashville. That's insane. It is basically a Coyle Donato thing all over again there. So on the Buffalo side, Skinner, 37 goals, 23 assists. And I can't help but look at these totals and think about early in the year when he was on a 50, 60 goal pace and looked like he was going to get 85 or 90 points. And he's right around, his career highs. Sure, and that's notable, but boy, is he cooled off. Dahlin, 8 goals, 33 assists, 41 points. When a defenseman comes in as a teenager and puts up 40-plus points, do not rule him out as a Calder Trophy candidate. As in, I know everybody's ready to just hand it to Pettersson, but I don't know. I got a funny feeling Dahlin's going to get more votes than we think. Connor Sherry, 13 goals, 19 assists for him, so 32 points. Brendan Montour, 17 games as a member of the Buffalo Sabres, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. And Casey Middlestad, who is a guy that, fans seem to want to pick at if they don't like Buffalo. 12 goals, 13 assists, and yes, it hasn't been the rookie year everybody envisioned before the season started, but not all rookies come in ready to go, and some of them take a little bit longer, and I'm sure Buffalo will take the appropriate resources to make sure Middlestad's good to go for year 2. Winning the Calder doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best player in your rookie class. It means you're the best player that year. As the rookies, you're the best player of the rookies, and I can definitely do a video at some point. It's more of an off-season video thing where I could talk about Calder winners and then guys who were lurking in the weeds that didn't have particularly great rookie seasons, but emerged as the best from that rookie class. Goaltending tandems, Pekka Rinne and UC Saros, are both having a good year. I feel like they need Rinne to really take over, but it's against Buffalo, so I'd imagine Saros would probably start tonight. And on the Buffalo side, Hutton and Ullmark, it's been as advertised. You've got 2 goaltenders who might be really decent backups, but they don't really have that big number 1 goaltender, and they need that. They need the goaltender who can go out there and give you that consistent, fantastic run, sort of like what Dallas has with Bishop, sort of like what we've seen with Bobrovsky recently in Columbus. And this league, the difference between the very good and the just the excellent and the good, that dividing line, it's pretty fine. So if your goaltender isn't quite as good as the other goaltender, might be perfectly serviceable. And I'm not saying Hutton's not a good goaltender, and I'm not saying Olmark isn't. I'm just saying I would not see them as being a starting goaltender for a playoff team. And this season, they started off great, and then it's really fallen off for them. And for the defense, it's not all on the goaltenders. Next up, Pittsburgh, 43-25-11. Very quietly lurking around, waiting for playoffs time to start. In against the Detroit Red Wings, who are 31-38-10. The Red Wings have become a bit of a story, haven't they? This young, plucky team is winning some games. And while they're out, they have a chance tonight to go out there at home, and they're better at home than on the road, and play against Pittsburgh Penguins team that's third in the Metro and maybe do some damage. They're 2 points behind the Islanders are the Pittsburgh Penguins, 5 behind the Washington Capitals, 4 ahead of Carolina, 3 ahead of Columbus. They won the only meeting between they and the Detroit Red Wings this year, which should mean they meet again before the end of the year. Because they should meet 3 times, they're in the same conference. Pittsburgh's an interesting story. They've gone on a nice little run here. Gets overshadowed by other teams, but they've been playing very well. Scoring for Pittsburgh, Brian Rust, 18 goals, 17 assists, just consistently puts out solid numbers. Simone, 8 goals, 20 assists. I do wonder about what the ceiling is with Dominic Simone. Cullen, there's that 7 goals, 13 assists, Matt Cullen. A lot of seasons with 20 or more points. Jared McCann, 29 games now as a member of the Penguins, 11 goals, 5 assists, 16 points. It slowed down for McCann, but still pretty solid run as a Penguin. Bugstad, 29 games, 8 goals, 5 assists, 13 points. He's been solid for them. On the Detroit side, I wanted to look at the kids. Taro Hirose, 7 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points for him. Watch for him to go out there tonight and do something. Madison Bowie, 14 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. He has done far better for Detroit than he did for Washington. Is there some danger that maybe he's just having a good run after the trade? Maybe next year some of the bad habits show up. I don't know. But it's a nice story. Kuffner's played 7 games, doesn't have a point yet. Jake Chelios, that is the son of Chris Chelios, 2 games for him, no points yet. And, of course, Zadina's the one they're waiting for to come back up next year. He played the prerequisite 9 games this year. Got a goal and an assist. There are some nice pieces with the Detroit Red Wings, and there's definitely reason for hope that next season's going to be better. I do have concerns when it comes to in-net. But on the Pittsburgh side with goaltending, Murray and DeSmith, this is a solid tandem. And Matt Murray is starting to look like playoff Matt Murray. He's had a very good run the last little while here. On the Detroit side of things, Howard, average goaltender. Bernier, decent numbers as a backup. You do wish the win-loss record was better. But I've pointed out in a lot of reviews that it's not on Bernier. It's been goal support. He just doesn't get any. So Howard gets more goal support than does Bernier, and maybe next year, maybe that changes, because you're going to have a team that can score with Detroit next year. The curly fries that you get every time that they score 3 goals, that's going to be changed back to being a hat trick, is my guess. Because I think there's going to be a lot of games where Detroit scores 3 goals. Or maybe they'll make it 4 goals, you get curly fries. Don't worry, Detroit. I'll make sure you get your curly fries. If I got to write them a letter or strongly worded email. Edmonton, 34-36-9 in against 36-29-14. 14. Colorado. Is Colorado an argument in favor of changing how we award points? I've mentioned before that if you do a 3-2-1 system where, I mentioned it last year and I think the year before, where if you do a point where it's three points for a win in regulation, 2 for a win in overtime, and then 1 point for a loss in overtime or a shootout, that it doesn't really change the standings. But 14. You have 14 points this way. They're the number 2 wild card. They're 3 points behind Dallas. They're 2 points ahead of Arizona and 5 points ahead of Minnesota. And I do wonder whether or not Colorado is going to be dangerous if they get into the playoffs. Those 14 losses in overtime or shootouts tell you that they're not really blowing the doors off everybody. They're getting points. And that's the thing in the NHL now. You get your points however you get them. Both teams have won a game between these two. It does feel like the Oilers are kind of deflated at another playoff miss, and maybe the only guys who are going to keep it going are the first line, which is Cassian, McDavid, and Draisaitl. But looking at other scorers on the team, including Cassian in the list, Chase on 21 goals, 15 assists. Do they bring him back next year? Cassian, 15 goals and 11 assists. Good run for him. He had an assist last night. Gagne in 22 games, back with the Oilers, 5 goals, 4 assists. Started off well, and the points have kind of dropped, but it's dropped all over for the Oilers. Puljujarvi is the big question mark. 46 games played, 4 goals, 5 assists. Does he have another shot at the Oilers next year? Is that done? Will they move him? And of course, Kyler Yamamoto, 17 games played, 1 goal, 1 assist. He will definitely get another shot with the Oilers, but is he an NHL projectable player? Or is he going to end up being a very good American League player? Does he end up in Europe? A lot of questions with Yamamoto for me. On the Colorado side of things, Kerfoot, 13 goals, 29 assists. Johnson, 6 goals, 16 assists. Andrighetto is a guy they could use some secondary scoring from him. 6 goals, 10 assists. And Jost. So this is kind of, if this team is going to be dangerous, who do they need? Jost, 10 goals, 13 assists. If Jost wanted to go on a bit of a run and maybe carry that over into the playoffs, I think that'd be appreciated. JT Compher, 16 goals and 16 assists. Goaltending, Koskinen is the guy. I have Stolarz on the board, but I might as well just had it just Koskinen. And Koskinen for me has been just average. I still don't understand the contract. I really don't. I don't think he's been bad. I don't think he's been great. I don't think he's a $4.5 million goaltender for 3 years. I just don't. Grubauer has been fantastic. Which is good because Varlamov was pedestrian for the last few games he played. So I would expect Grubauer from here, and then Colorado's got some questions to ask themselves about next year. Is Grubauer their starter next year? Do they bring up Francouz as the backup? Keep Grubauer as the starter, and Varlamov would go as a free agent. So that's the question I have with them. All right, last up, finally, the LA Kings in against the Arizona Coyotes. If I had told you in October this game's going to matter to one team and not the other, you'd say, well, yeah, the Kings, that's going to be a big game for them because they might be closing in on the division. No. Arizona, this is kind of that last gasp, right? If they lose and Colorado wins tonight, that probably kills the dream for them. The LA Kings, 29-41-9. They got destroyed last night. The Arizona Coyotes, 38-33-8. 2 points behind Colorado, 3 points ahead of Minnesota. They've won 2 out of 3 meetings between they and the LA Kings this year. When you look at their scoring, the LA Kings have struggled, and it starts and ends with Kopitar, 21 goals, 37 assists, 58 points. And I say starts and ends because the team revolves around him a lot. You look at last year and all the credit he got for having this great season and bringing the LA Kings back into the playoffs and making them relevant. Well, then, when his totals fall and the team kind of falls, I'm not saying you blame him, but you can look and say, well, yeah, Kopitar really is the engine for this team, and if that engine's kind of sputtering along, the team probably sputtered as well. Iafallo, 15 goals, 17 assists. I like Iafallo. I do wonder where his ceiling lies, if 35, 40 points is as high as it gets. Adrian Kempe, 12 goals, 15 assists. Not the kind of totals likely Kings fans wanted to see at the start of the year from him. Dion Phaneuf's playing out the string. 1 goal, 5 assists for him this year. I don't know if he comes back next year. I don't know if this is it or not. Kyle Clifford's now reached 10 goals. So 10 goals, 8 assists for him. This is a scoring challenge team, and we'll see if they're able to fix that as soon as next year. There are some prospects in that system, and we'll see if some of them come up and help to fix what's wrong here. And also the speed issue. Arizona, Galchenyuk, 18 goals, 22 assists, 40 points. And we still don't quite know what Galchenyuk is. Is he a star? Is he just an average player? At times he looks like one. At times he looks like the other. And sometimes he just doesn't look very interested. Hinostroza, 16 goals, 21 assists. A heart and soul type guy. Never going to be a 75, 80 point guy, but he's a heart and soul type player. Brad Richardson, 17 goals, 8 assists. Kind of late for a career year as a goal scorer, but there you go. Archibald, 12 goals, 10 assists. Unexpected. 100% unexpected that Archibald would get to 22 points this year. Clayton Keller, I think it was expected he'd move ahead, and he really hasn't. 14 goals, 32 assists, 46 points. If there's any one concern I have right now with Arizona, it is that. It is that Clayton Keller hasn't taken that step forward as a scorer. Goaltenders Quick and Campbell, depending on the night, they either look, oh yeah, no, they're good, or wow, LA has a goaltending problem. I'm in the middle of the road on this one. I don't know. I think they're a middle of the road goaltending tandem at this stage. I don't know that Quick is ever going to be a top 10 goaltender in the league again. But goaltenders can play very well into their late 30s. I just think that all the injuries and I think all the miles, I think it's starting to add up with Jonathan Quick. And for the Arizona Coyotes, I did with Montreal. It's Darcy Kemper and nobody else. This is Darcy Kemper's show. If they're going to make it, they'll make it because Kemper wills them there. If they're not, it's going to be because Darcy Kemper can only do so much. So there you go. You guys are set for tonight's action and kind of for next year too. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.